We have just arrived at what will possibly be the most interesting and dynamic discussion of our entire time together. Are you excited? All right. I want to just check in on the energy in the room. So I'm Deborah Kane. I'm the Vice President of Food and Farms at EcoTrust, and I am your moderator. And this will be a short panel discussion. We're only going to be with this last topic for about an hour. And I'm actually going to go back to some of what I was saying in my opening remarks for those of you that have been with us for the duration. When I kicked us off yesterday afternoon, I asked you to take a look at the list of sponsors for our event. And while I didn't read the names, I encouraged folks to think about our sponsors as true partners in the work that we're all doing. And so I can't help myself but point out that we have 4 distribution partners who have graciously sponsored today's and yesterday's event. And those distribution partners are Food Services of America and Cisco and Duck Delivery and Organically Grown Company. And we are absolutely blessed in this region. And I don't know the California distribution model as well as I know the great work of many of the distribution companies in the Northwest. So I can tell you that we are blessed in the Northwest to have distribution partners who are ready, willing, and able to work with us to get more locally produced foods into our schools. And we thank them for that. And I feel the need to bend over backwards to tell you all this because what we're going to do in this next session is actually take a look at a report that's come out from our colleagues in Southern California. The report was sent to you in that very first email. We at EcoTrust sent you those emails, 7 days to the assembly, 6 days to the assembly, 5 days to the assembly. And in that first one, the 7 days to the assembly email, those of you who diligently did your homework would have seen that we had asked you to take a look at a report called Fresh Food Distribution Models for the Greater Los Angeles Region. That's the big title. And then the subhead is Barriers and Opportunities to Facilitate and Scale Up the Distribution of Fresh Fruits and Vegetables. And so I'm hoping that some of you read that report. We're actually going to take a look at it in some detail in this next session. But the reason, again, that I bend over backwards to make the point that I'm madly in love with our distribution partners and that they are just so crucial in the work that we do is that I asked myself how I would feel if the report subhead was Barriers and Opportunities to Working with EcoTrust as we work on school food. And if it was a report related to, a report that basically suggested that while EcoTrust is very well intentioned and trying really hard, they're just falling short. And so we really might need to create a separate, different nonprofit structure to support the school food services. And so I had some butterflies about facilitating this conversation for reasons related to our deep desire to create a very, very big tent and to acknowledge that, that while not everything is perfect, not everything is so terribly broken, that we can't work with what we have. So I wanted to make that point before we jumped into our conversation about distribution. So thank you for listening to me. What we're going to do is ask our 3 panelists to stand while I introduce them. I've heard that works really well. My colleague Michelle told me how well it worked. First, we're going to hear from Vanessa, and I'm going to get your last name wrong. Vanessa Zajfen. Vanessa Zajfen is the Farm to Institution Program Coordinator at the Center for Food and Justice at the Urban and Environmental Policy Institute at Occidental College. Vanessa works closely with local farmers, distribution firms, and other farm to institution practitioners to develop market-based solutions and local food programming opportunities to increase access and flow of good food in low-income communities across Southern California. Vanessa has a BA from UC Santa Cruz, an MS in Sustainable Agriculture from Iowa State University, and formerly owned and operated Beyond Organic Produce Company, a produce company that specialized in sourcing and selling locally grown foods and Vanessa is also the lead researcher and author of the report that we'll be looking at. We thought the first thing that we would do is hear more from Vanessa about the report and the research findings, and then very specifically ask one school district and one distribution partner to respond to the report and answer the question, several questions in fact. Did some of the findings resonate with your experience in distribution challenges? What are you finding to be best practices? And how do you react and respond to some of the recommendations that are in the report with regard to how we get more regionally and locally produced food into our schools? And so after we hear more about the report, we'll hear first from Geeta Gracer-Sweeney, who is the Assistant Director of Nutrition Services for Portland Public Schools in Portland, Oregon. In the 15 years prior to joining Portland Public Schools, Geeta served as the Food Service Director for 3 school districts in the Austin, Texas area. In her current role at Portland Public Schools, Geeta is responsible for planning menus for breakfast, lunch, and supper, and creating recipes for new menu items. She's also responsible for supply chain management, food and paper bid specifications, as well as middle and high school cafeteria operations. Geeta has been instrumental in sourcing product for the Portland Public Schools Harvest of the Month and local lunches programs. Geeta lives in Northwest Portland, and you're in Northwest Portland, so she lives somewhere around here, with her husband John and their children Eric and Kyle. And then we will hear finally from Randy Gehrig, who joins us from Cisco Portland. And Randy has been the Produce Business Development Manager, or is currently the Produce Business Development Manager at Cisco, a role that he has played for the last 5 years as it relates to produce, but Randy has been in the distribution business, so the distribution industry, if you will, for the last 30 years, and his perspective is going to be very welcome. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Vanessa.
Today we are going to talk about this report that we put out at CFJ, and my hope is that after reading the report, you didn't feel like we didn't want to create that big tent. We do want to have and work positively and well with large distribution firms and a variety of people that are moving food in Southern California and across this nation. So what we're going to do today is just basically quickly talk about the methods that we used, the major findings in terms of barriers. We've been talking about those for the past 2 days, so I won't dwell on those too much. And then talk about what we're calling our strategies or opportunities to building sustainable businesses and services that can be used by food service directors and distribution companies to increase that flow. And then, as Deborah said, a lively discussion, hopefully a friendly one. So given our previous lecture this morning, I'm not sure methodology is the right term, but the methods that we use for this study, I talk about in the next 2 slides. This started out originally as a year-long planning grant from funding from the California Endowment. That's what I was hired on and brought on to CFJ to do. And the goal of which was to really evaluate how large-scale institutions could readily access locally grown fruits and vegetables, make it easier for them to get them. So now we see ourselves really in the implementation phase, which we're expecting to go, well, we know will be going on for the next 2 years, hopefully 3. We've secured funding from the California Endowment again for that, as well as additional funding for the first year, as well as I think the next couple of years has been secured from the UPS Foundation and Compton Foundation. They've been helping to sort of document the learning process and project development. So just to quickly go over the method, Southern California is a large area, so we decided to try and focus specifically on 4 areas as case studies, and those are Los Angeles, Orange County, San Diego, and Ventura. I conducted, as well as my colleagues, a series of personal interviews with food service directors, farmers, distribution firms, and specialists, as well as did a number of site visits to farms, distribution centers, schools. I talked also with a lot of other advocates and people in the farm-to-school world, moms, principals, I said farmers, sorry about that. And then I did a lot of research. There are a lot of publications. This is a very popular topic. So there's a lot for me to read. There was also a bit of raw data that CFJ had that I had to leaf through and kind of filter, as well as looking at all those wonderful models that people such as yourselves are forwarding across the country.